My daughter lifted her glass and smiled at the crowded Christmas table as if she were about to honor someone. Instead, she looked straight at me and said, "We're ashamed of you, Mom." Then she laughed sharp, confident, rehearsed. A few of the Whitakers chuckled along, not because they understood the joke, but because Brielle had given them permission to. I sat there for a moment, letting the words settle. I am Marielle Haddon, 64, a woman who has lived long enough to recognize when humiliation is intentional. Brielle's voice carried that tone bright on the surface, brittle underneath. She wanted the room to see me small. She wanted them to think she was above me. Brielle. Her husband Daniel murmured, shifting in his chair. Maybe that's enough. She waved him off with a polished smile. Come on, Mom knows I'm joking. But her eyes never left mine. And there was nothing joking about them. She was daring me to react. Daring me to prove her point, that I was the one who could not handle myself in a room like this. The guests, all dressed in their carefully curated winter outfits, waited to see what I would do. They did not know me well. They knew what they had been told, whatever Brielle had fed them, to maintain the image she worked so hard to protect. I placed my napkin on the table and stood. All right, I said softly. The room quieted. Even the clink of silverware stopped. Brielle tilted her chin. Mom, it was just a joke. Sit down. I looked at her, not at the perfect hair she worked on every morning, not at the dress she had probably chosen to impress her mother-in-law. I looked at the daughter I raised alone, the daughter who used to hold my hand crossing rainy Portland streets, the daughter who once cried when I left for late shifts. I know what you told the Whitakers about me, I said. Her smile died instantly. The color drained from her face as if someone had pulled a plug. Daniel's brows shot up. Cynthia Whitaker's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Brielle opened her mouth, but only a thin breath came out. Her eyes glistened, the first tear gathering at the edge. I did not say anything else. I did not need to. The truth was already trembling in her throat, threatening to spill out in front of the people she wanted most to impress. I pulled out my chair gently and sat back down, letting the silence do its work. The tear slid down her cheek, and she looked away from me as if she were suddenly 14 again and caught in a lie. The rest of the table stared at her, waiting. And in that hanging, fragile moment, I knew the past had finally caught up with her long before anyone understood how it had begun. When Brielle's tear slipped down her cheek at the dinner table, I saw a flash of the little girl she used to be, the child who once grabbed my coat sleeve whenever we crossed a busy corner in downtown Portland. I raised her alone from the time she was 4. Her father left without a forwarding address, and I patched together 2 jobs to keep the 2 of us afloat. I cleaned offices at night and answered phones at a community clinic during the day. Brielle used to wait for me in the back room after school, her small legs swinging off the folding chair. She would hand me her drawings and say, "Mom, I saved the best one for you." There was a time she followed me everywhere. "Can I sleep with you tonight?" she'd whisper after a nightmare. I would lift the blanket. "Of course you can." Back then, she saw me as her whole world. I remembered a damp March evening when she was 11. I was late picking her up from choir practice. Rain soaking through my shoes. She ran to me anyway, wrapping her arms around my waist. "You always come back," she said. Breathless. "I always will," I told her. The years after that moved in small, quiet shifts. Middle school friends teased her about my uniform. High school classmates talked about weekend trips her friends took that I could not afford. Brielle never said anything cruel then, but she began to sigh when I showed up in my work jacket, and she stopped introducing me to new friends. One night, after a summer shift, she glanced at me and said, "Mom, can you drop me off a block away? I do not want people to think I cannot drive yet." I agreed. I loved her too much to argue. At the Christmas table now, the memory stung more sharply than the humiliation. It was the first moment I realized she was starting to hide me. even if she did not say the words aloud. And yet, for many years after, she still needed me more than she ever admitted. The shift began after Brielle married into the Whitaker family. They were polite enough to my face, but their smiles always held a quiet calculation, as if they were assessing whether Brielle had come from the right kind of background. At the engagement dinner, Cynthia Whitaker shook my hand and said, "You must be exhausted. Marielle, working so many hours at your age?" I answered, "It keeps me moving." Her lips tightened. "Well, we do admire your effort." Brielle caught the comment. But she didn't defend me. She only whispered, "Mom, please don't take it personally." A few months after the wedding, Brielle began to decline invitations on my behalf. "Mom, the event is really formal," she would say, or "it's mostly corporate people." "You would be bored." Daniel would ask, "Why not bring your mom? She always makes conversation." But Brielle replied, "She prefers staying home." I never said that. And she knew it. The moment that cut the deepest came during a summer barbecue at their house. I stepped onto the patio just as Brielle's voice drifted through the open kitchen window. "Mom is sweet," she said quietly, "but she's not presentable." "I do not want people misreading who I am," Cynthia murmured. "It is understandable. We all protect our image." I stayed frozen on the steps. When Brielle turned around and saw me, her face twitched. "Mom, you scared me," she said. "Too quickly." I did not mean to interrupt. I answered. She brushed past me, touching my arm lightly. "Let's not make today awkward." "Okay." From then on, every gathering felt like something Brielle needed to manage, as if I were an unpredictable variable in a life she wanted to curate. The distance grew quietly, without confrontation, just enough small choices, small lies, and small rejections to make it clear that Brielle was no longer proud to stand beside me. I was babysitting my granddaughter, Lila, the week before Christmas when it happened. Brielle had rushed out for a last-minute errand and left her phone on the kitchen counter. It buzzed once, then again, the screen lighting up with a preview. I did not mean to read it. The words were simply there. "Do not worry. I will manage, Mom. If she embarrasses us, I will shut her down." My hands stilled. Another message appeared before the screen dimmed. It might be funny. Daniel's name was at the top of the thread. A pressure tightened in my chest, the kind that comes before tears or anger. I swallowed both. Lila toddled toward me with her toy doll, unaware that I had just learned what her mother truly thought of me. When Brielle returned, she breezed through the door with shopping bags. "Sorry, everything took forever." "Did she behave?" "She always does," I said, keeping my voice steady. Brielle grabbed her phone from the counter. "I need to send a quick reply." Her thumbs moved fast. She hesitated a moment, glancing at me. "You look tired." "Mom, we do not have to stay long at dinner this year. I had no plans to leave early," I answered. She smiled politely, then adjusted Lila's coat. "I just want things to run smoothly. The Whitakers care a lot about presentation." "So do you," I said quietly. Her head snapped up. "What is that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. I told her, just an observation." She studied me for a moment, confused, then brushed it off. "Please just follow my lead this year. I do not want unnecessary tension." I nodded, though something in me had already shifted. I had spent years excusing her small wounds, her careful omissions, her growing need to distance herself from me. But this was different. Planning to shut me down was not a misunderstanding or a slip of the tongue. It was intention. And as Lila clung to my leg before they left, I knew that Christmas dinner would not unfold the way Brielle expected. By the time I walked into the Whitaker dining room on Christmas evening, Brielle had already decided who she needed to be. Her back was straight, her smile polished, her tone bright enough to impress anyone watching. She greeted me with a quick kiss on the cheek, the kind you give an acquaintance, not a mother. Mom made it. She announced loudly. She likes to keep things simple. Cynthia Whitaker's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she said nothing. I took my seat beside Daniel. He whispered, "I am glad you came." Brielle shot him a warning glance. Mom never misses holidays. She does not have much else on her calendar. That is not true, I said. Brielle responded with a small laugh. Oh, Mom, you know I am teasing. Throughout dinner, she kept at it. Mom, you wore that same sweater last winter, right, Mom? Tell them about your clinic job. It is adorable, really. When I reached for a serving dish, she murmured, Careful, Mom. Do not spill on the tablecloth. It is antique. Daniel set down his fork. Brielle, stop. She ignored him. I am just helping. Cynthia leaned toward me with a soft voice. Marielle, your work at the clinic, that is community service, is it not? It is paid work, I said. Cynthia blinked slowly. Brielle told us you volunteer because you cannot keep up with longer hours at your age. I turned to my daughter. She froze, her lips tightening around the lie she had not expected to be repeated in front of me. I never said that, Brielle replied quickly. Cynthia looked between us, confused. You did, dear. At the charity luncheon last month. The air shifted. Brielle's confidence thinned. Daniel stared at her, waiting. Then Cynthia gave me a look, not mocking, not judgmental. Pity. It hit harder than any insult Brielle had thrown at me. And as she turned back to her plate, I understood that Brielle had been rewriting me for the Whitakers long before tonight. Dinner had settled into an uneasy rhythm when Brielle suddenly pushed back her chair and stood, her glass lifted high, the room quieting as though she had rehearsed this moment. Daniel looked up sharply, already uneasy. To family, she began, smiling too brightly, and to keeping certain, expectations low. A few guests chuckled politely. Unsure where she was going, she glanced at me, and her smile sharpened. We are ashamed of you, Mom. The words landed with a thud, followed by her loud, rehearsed laugh. The kind of laugh meant to cue others. It worked. 2 guests joined stiffly, then another, their laughter thin with confusion. I did not move. Daniel set down his glass. Brielle, stop. She waved him off. Relax. Everyone knows Mom is harmless. She will take the joke. It does not sound like a joke, Daniel said. Voice low. It is just family humor. She insisted. Mom knows how to laugh at herself. I looked at her, really looked at her. The carefully styled hair, the dress chosen to impress Cynthia, the posture she practiced in mirrors. None of that could hide the fear flickering at the edges of her eyes, the fear of not being good enough for the family she had married into. Brielle, I said softly. Enough. She stiffened. Why embarrassed? I stood. Chairs shifted, forks stilled. I felt every eye on us, but only one gaze mattered. Daniel. He stared at me with an expression that was not confusion or judgment, but guilt. Heavy, painful guilt. He knew something. Something Brielle never expected me to confront out loud. Cynthia broke the tension. Dear, perhaps this is not the moment, no. Brielle cut in, her voice rising. I am tired of pretending. Mom makes everything difficult. She shows up wearing whatever she wants, saying whatever she wants. I am done covering for her. Daniel flinched. Brielle, please. She ignored him and lifted her glass again, ready to push the performance further. We have all been thinking it. I am just the one brave enough to say it. I took a breath and placed my hand gently on the back of my chair. Brielle, I said, keeping my voice steady. When you say you are ashamed of me, Remember, I am not the one who lied. Her laugh stopped cold. Daniel's shoulders tensed. The room felt suddenly fragile, and in the silence that followed, Brielle understood that I was no longer willing to stay small for her. The room had gone silent after my last words, the kind of silence that shakes loose every mask in the room. Brielle stood frozen with her glass half raised, waiting for me to back down like I always had. I did not. I stepped away from my chair. All right. Brielle, I said softly, you want honesty tonight? Then let us be honest. She swallowed hard. Mom, sit down. Daniel's voice cut through. Let her speak. I turned toward the table, not raising my voice, not pleading. Brielle, tell them who really paid half your down payment. Her breath caught. Mom, stop. This is not the place. Then tell them why you told this family I was an alcoholic you had to cut off. A gasp rippled through the table. Daniel's chair scraped back. You said your mother was unstable. He whispered. You told me she needed supervision. Cynthia stared at Brielle with wide, sharp eyes. You told us she barged into your home drunk last spring. Brielle shook her head violently. I only said that because, Mom, please, I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin folder. I kept everything. I said quietly, I did not plan on using it, but you planned on humiliating me tonight. So here we are. The color drained from her face. No, Mom, do not. I set the folder on the table and opened it. Printed bank statements, transfers from my account to hers, the one for $40,000 labeled down payment support, screenshots of her texts to an old friend. I told Daniel my mom is a mess. They believe me. It works. As long as they think she is unstable. I will never be compared to her. Cynthia's hand flew to her mouth. Daniel stared at the papers as if they burned him. You lied, he said. Voice breaking. I was protecting myself. Brielle choked out. I wanted to fit in, Mom. Please, do not do this. You already did, I answered. Her knees buckled. She dropped into her chair as if her body could not hold the weight of her own choices. A sob tore from her, raw and uncontrollable. Tears streamed down her face, smudging the makeup she had spent an hour perfecting. I am sorry, she cried, reaching toward me. Mom, I am so sorry. But the apology came too late. The damage had been done long before tonight. The Whitakers stared at her, stunned, the image she had built slipping away piece by piece. And for the first time, Brielle felt the cost of the lies she had used to climb above me. No one moved. Brielle's sobs filled the space where her confidence used to sit. Daniel stared at her as if he no longer recognized the woman he married. Why did you lie about your own mother? He asked. His voice tight. Why would you do that? Brielle shook her head, tears dripping onto her plate. I was scared. I did not want anyone to judge me. I thought if they saw her the way I said Daniel cut her off, the way you said you created a story, you made her look broken. Cynthia leaned forward, her tone sharper than I had ever heard. Brielle, you allowed us to treat your mother with pity. You let us believe she was unstable. She looked at me. Marielle, I truly did not know. I know, I answered. That is why I am leaving now. Brielle stood abruptly. Mom! Wait, please, I turned away from the table. My coat hung near the door, and I reached for it without rushing, without shame. Behind me, chairs scraped. Brielle hurried after me, but a firm hand caught her arm. Let her go, Cynthia said. You need to stay here, Mom, Brielle cried, voice cracking. I opened the door and stepped outside, letting her voice trail off behind me as the room she had built so carefully collapsed around her. I had just poured my morning tea when a knock sounded at the door. When I opened it, Daniel stood there, eyes tired, holding a manila folder against his chest. Marielle, he said quietly, I need to talk to you. I stepped aside. He entered slowly, as if unsure he deserved to. I looked through our accounts last night. He said, everything you showed, it matches. Every transfer, every message, every lie. He opened the folder and laid the papers on my table. She hid all of this from me. I sat down, saying nothing. He rubbed his hands together, ashamed. The Whitakers met this morning, he continued. Cynthia is furious. They are revoking every financial privilege Brielle depended on. No more assistance with the mortgage. No more monthly support. She has to handle every bill on her own. He took a breath. She is also suspended from all family events until she apologizes properly. Not a text, not a performance, a real apology. I nodded once. Daniel hesitated, then added, Cynthia asked me to invite you to next year's Christmas dinner. She said you deserve to be there. He paused. Brielle will not be invited. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He closed the folder gently. I am sorry. Marielle, he said, for believing the worst of you. His voice cracked. And the apology hung between us, heavier than any gift they could have offered. 1 year later, I walked into the Whitaker dining room again, this time through the front door. Greeted with warm voices instead of careful glances. Daniel hugged me. Cynthia took my coat herself. We are glad you are here. Marielle, she said, you are our honored guest tonight. The table was set exactly as it had been the year before, except for one detail, an empty chair at the far end. Brielle's chair. She had not been invited. Cynthia lifted her glass. Marielle, would you give our first toast? I stood slowly. Every face turned toward me, not with pity or judgment, but with respect earned the hard way. I looked at the empty chair. For a moment, I saw Brielle there, the polished smile, the nervous pride, the fear under it all. And then I let the image fade. I raised my glass. Some people spend years being ashamed of the wrong person. The room stayed silent for a breath, as if the words needed space to settle. Then Daniel nodded, lifting his own glass. To truth, he said, and to rebuilding what matters. To truth, others echoed. I sat down, the weight I had carried for decades finally easing. If you felt this chapter deeply, like, comment, or subscribe to hear more stories that stay with you long after they end.